Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Callie, and today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up. For January, I read a total of 29 books, 10 of which were printed, 12 ebooks, and 7 audiobooks. Did a lot of ebooks this month, but last month, but it's because I was on vacation, and I have learned from experience not to bring hardcover or even paperback books on vacation, just because it gets very cumbersome. And with how much I read, ebooks are just the way to go. I ended up reading a total of 9,406 pages, as well as 101 hours and 37 minutes of audio. For genre, I read 10 fantasy, 9 romantasy. So I've added romantasy as its own genre now because it's definitely ramping up a lot more, and it's just it's my favorite combination. Like, it's its own thing now. So 9 romantasy. With that, I read a total of 5 arcs because I have now begun arc reading as of this year. It's been a goal of mine to become an arc reviewer, and I have finally taken the plunge and started doing it this year. So I read 5 in the month of January, and then I had 3 rereads and 1 DNF. Since I read so many books, and I don't want to make this video 9 hours long, I'm gonna just go through all the books I read with the rating, and if I enjoyed it. I don't know. The rating, we'll go rating and whether or not I would recommend it to you. We'll go with that. So, starting off the year strong, I reread 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. I originally gave this book 5 stars, and upon my reread, I gave it 5 stars. Would always recommend this book to anyone who loves fairy tale retellings. Next, I read Believe Me by Tahereh Mafi. This is the final novella in the Shatter Me series. I finally got around to this, and since it's so short, I'm very shocked that I finally got around to this. I ended up giving this 4 stars, and if you liked the Shatter Me series, this is like a slice of life cutesy novella for that series. Now I reread 6 Crimson Cranes so that I can finally read The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim, which is the sequel to this series. And I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Not quite as good as the first one, but I would still recommend the entire duology if you love those deep lore, fairy tale, whimsical stories. Up next, I had another reread, and that is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, which is the 5th book in the ACOTAR series. This was part of my doing all of SJM's books in publication order. So finally finished this one. I think I started this in the middle of December. I gave this 5 stars. Gave it 5 stars the first 2 times I read it. Gave it 5 stars the 3rd time I read it. I listened to the audiobook, which I would highly recommend doing if you have not done so already. Elizabeth Evans is a phenomenal narrator. Up next, I read Master of Iron by Trisha Levenseller. This is the 2nd book after Blade of Secrets. I ended up giving this 4 stars. It wasn't as strong as Blade of Secrets to me. However, I would recommend this if you love Dungeons and Dragons, Norse mythology, and magical weapons. This was just very fun. Next, I read Shine Your Icy Crown by Amanda Lovelace. This is a poetry collection. Amanda Lovelace is probably my favorite poet, one of the only ones I actually read, but I gave this 5 stars. I love her poetry collections. They are very feminine and feminist based, and that is what they surround. This is a part of her collection of You Are Your Own Fairy Tale, I think is the name of it. A lot of these poems I could pick out, and just a lot of them hit home, and I was able to resonate with all of them. Up next, I read Beasts of Ruin by Ayana Gray. This is the 2nd book in the Beasts of Prey series. I love the 1st book. I reread it last month so that I could finish out the entire series, because that ended up being perfect since book 3 dropped in January as well. So, however, Beasts of Ruin suffered from 2nd book syndrome, so I only gave it like 3.75 to 4. Not my favorite. However, I would highly recommend this entire series. I have since finished the series. Books 1 and 3 hold up. Continuing with the 6 Crimson Cranes world, I read Her Radiant Curse by Elizabeth Lim. Now, this is the prequel book to 6 Crimson Cranes that follows the evil stepmother and her origin story. I give this 4.5 stars. This was a phenomenal evil stepmother origin story. It was really engaging, had that same whimsical vibes as the 1st book of 6 Crimson Cranes, and just had really cool animal magic as well as just great villain origin story. Up next, I read Heart of the Fae by Emma Hamm. This has been on my list for a while because I met Emma Hamm at ApollyCon twice, and I had yet to read any of her stuff, and last year I ended up reading her Fireheart series. So I know this is one of her more popular, which is part of the Otherworld series. I really like this. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I gave it 4 stars. It was a really fresh take on Beauty and the Beast, which I haven't seen in a hot minute, so got a lot of enjoyment out of this one. Next, I read Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. This is her first book in her Lakefront Billionaires series, which is, you see characters from all of her other worlds in all of her other books. So, but this is the start of her new series, and this was so much fun. I gave it 4.5 stars. This is a childhood rivals to lovers story. She's an interior designer and he owns and operates a construction company. So they have to work together on this really old house, and naturally romance occurs. Really fun, really hard-hitting topics. Please read the trigger warnings. And I just, 4.5 stars. I loved it. Up next, I read All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. This is her contemporary fiction story about 2 Muslim teenagers and the struggles that comes with being not only a teenager, but being a Muslim, being the child of immigrants, and dealing with all of those hard-hitting topics. I gave this 5 stars. I listened to the audiobook of this one, actually, and it was so intoxicating to read and invigorating. I could not stop listening to it. I read audiobooks at work, so I was just staring, 1,000-yard stare at my computer at work, just enraptured by this story, and it makes you angry for these kids, and it is just insane how everything unfolds within this book. Up next, I read The Traitor Queen by Danielle L. Jensen. This is the second book in the Bridge Kingdom series. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. It didn't intoxicate me as much as everyone said it was going to. I liked the first book. This one didn't really convince me to want to continue on with the series, because I know that the series is relatively long. I think it's going to end up being like 6 or 8 books following. Each 2 books there's a different couple. But I don't know, this just, I don't know if I just missed it or it just didn't hit the way that I expected it to, so I only gave it 3.5 stars. Next, I read Sovereign Sacrifice by Elise Kova. This is the 4th book in the Vortex Chronicles, which is her spin-off of the Book of Air, her Avatar series that I adored. So this happens, this story happens like a decade or 2 after the events of the final book of that series. So book 4, I ended up giving 4 stars, and this is probably my favorite in the entire series. This one was so interesting. Everything finally started to kind of come together in this 4th book. And these aren't long books, but this one hit different, and I was really excited about where the story was going to go and how everything was going to be able to resolve in the final book. Next, I read The Dream Runners by Shweta Thakrar. I ended up giving this 3 stars. I feel like this had a lot of potential to be really interesting and really cool. The atmosphere was 100% perfect. However, the characters and the plot line just felt jumbled and all over the place. So it just kind of like how I felt about her first book, Star Daughter. It just didn't quite get there. But really interesting premise about kids stealing dreams for gods, and there's this whole mystery around it, which was fascinating. It just never amped up. There weren't those peaks and valleys that I expect out of a really fun mystery like this. So unfortunately, not my favorite. Up next, I read Song of Silver, Flame Like Night. I always screw up this title because it is just so long, by Amelia Wenzhou. I love Amelia Wenzhou. I love her Blood Air series, so I was really excited to jump into a Chinese-inspired fantasy, and she did not disappoint. I give this 4.5 stars. This was really cool. It was dark. It almost kind of felt like a young adult version of the Poppy War, where it didn't quite get that dark, but it still had those military aspects, the dark protagonist, and just all-out war. This was an amazingly written story, and it just, the atmosphere was fantastic, the character development was fantastic, the plot was really interesting, and I was here for it the entire time. Up next is the first arc that I read, and that is Hearts That Cut by Kika Hatzapalu. I'm going to butcher that. I'm so sorry. But this was the first arc that I actually got approved for, which I was really excited for. This is actually a sequel to Threads That Bind, which was a Fairy Loot book earlier last year. I loved this. I gave it 4.5 stars. I was so entranced into the story. There was no second book syndrome to be had. This is only a duology. And this book comes out sometime in the summer. I'll put the, I don't remember the date offhand, but I'll put it on the screen. If you liked Threads That Bind, I liked this book better than Threads That Bind. This was so cool and just exploded our entire world. And I think I read this in one sitting. I just could not put it down. Up next, I read Gilded Serpent by Danielle L. Jensen. I've been real Danielle L. Jensen heavy the past couple of months, which has been a little weird, but it's fine. This is the third book in the Dark Shores series, and I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. To me, this was just too long. The story is really cool. It's got pirates. It's got really fun magic. It's got really cool characters. I like that each book we're following a different character. I think that's really fun. However, all of those come together, and it's just, you're jumping from so many characters, and it's hard to kind of follow, as well as the fact that it was about 150 pages too long. So I will be continuing the series. I thought it would be over by now. Well, that sounded bad. The series doesn't finish until later this year, but I will be trying to finish it out. Next is the second arc that I read, and that is Call of the Sea by Emily B. Rose. This was a really fun mermaidy romantasy book that I got approved for. I ended up giving it 3.5. This was really fun. I liked, it was Brave meets Little Mermaid, and it was that. However, because it was that, it was a bit predictable, and the dialogue was a bit too modern for like the time she was going for. However, regardless of all that, I had so much fun reading this. Her characterizations were super fun and really interesting, and I had just an overall fun time. I'm actually going to be meeting Emily B. Rose at a convention later this year, so really excited, and we'll definitely be picking up a copy. If you like anything Little Mermaid, anything Brave, would recommend, because also he's the merman, not the mermaid. It's super fun. Next, I listened to Friendly Face by Scott Cawthon and Andrea Wagner. This is, oh God, I don't even know what book this one is. I think it's 8 or 9 of the Five Nights at Freddy's Fazbear Frights series. This one I gave 3.5 stars, which is about the average that I'm doing for this entire series. I think there's been a couple of 4 stars in there. This one was definitely by far the most gross. So there was that. And they're just getting more and more wild, and I'm listening to them because they're like 5-hour long audiobooks. They are not long at all, and they're just stupid fun, if anything. Up next, I read Addicted After All by Krista and Becky Ritchie. This is the like 6th or so. I read a lot of really long series apparently. This is the 7th book in the Addicted series and / Calloway sister series. But we're back in Lily and Lo's perspective, which I really love. They're not my favorite couple. They actually might technically be my least favorite, but I love all 3 of the couples. But this is technically the culmination of their story, and I really liked how everything ended up going. I gave it 4 stars. This story is just, it's so wholesome, but not at the same time, which really makes no sense. But it's just, you root for these characters so hard, and that's what I'm here for. I'm here for the character development, and it's just so sweet, like almost sickeningly so, and I adored it. Next, I read Reset by Serena Dallin. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I borrowed this book from Sarah, so I no longer have it. I gave this 3 stars. I wanted to like this. The premise was really cool, that you reset your memory every like 3 years or something, or every year. And it was building up to be a very Hunger Games-esque revolution to get rid of the corrupt system. However, nothing ever came of the plot line, and I feel like it took us over halfway through the book to get to said plot line, which was kind of sad because the premise was really cool, so I only gave this 3 stars. Next, I listened to House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. Again, part of my big readathon in anticipation of Flame and Shadow. This was actually only the second time I have read this book, so I definitely caught on to a lot more than I did during my first read through, which I read on the day it came out in 2021? I think 2022. The first time I read this, I gave this 5 stars. Second time I read this, I dropped it about half a star just because some things didn't quite make sense and it got a little discombobulated at times. However, I love Bryson Hunt just so much, and I really enjoy this story. It's It just holds such a special place in my heart. And yes, I have read Flame and Shadow. I'm actually going to talk about that later because it was the last book that I read of this month. Next is the next arc that I read, and that is Of Jade and Dragons by Amber Chen. This comes out, I think, in April, sometime in spring. Haha, I did not like this one bit. I gave it 2.5 stars, and that was being nice. I did not like this. It was sold as something Mulan-esque, with war colleges and like dragons and all of that. I got absolutely none of that. None. There was a Mulan-esque thing, but the second a man came into the picture, she like swooned and gave up all of that. And there was no dragons. So I did not care for this at all. Unfortunately. Next I listened to When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn. I've been slowly reading this series and man, I don't really know why. These are so of the early 2000s and so cringe. I gave it 3 stars. Next I read Shadow Princess by Caroline Peckman and Suzanne Valenti. This is book 3 or 4 of Zodiac Academy. My biggest gripe with this series is they're too long. However, it is like reading a reality show and I can't not, but I do find myself just like skimming the pages to see what happens. But Amanda's stories suck. I do like how we're actually getting our plot line, which is really interesting. Like we're kind of done developing all the characters and the romances and now we're into plotland, which is kind of fun. But I still only gave this 3 stars. Next I read The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. This is the second book in the Serpent of Wings of Night duology. Loved this. This was 4.5 stars. This series lives rent-free in my brain right now. I am just obsessed with this. This is vampires. It was romantasy, and this was just so well done. I read this on my 3-hour flight to my vacation. And I just couldn't, but just the entire flight, I read this because it was just, I could not put it down. It distracted me from all things flight related, which was great because I don't fly well. But it was fantastic and kept me distracted. And 4.5 stars. Next is another arc. I read Beneath These Cursed Stars, which comes out in August. Again, I'm going to just keep putting the dates that these actually drop somewhere on the screen beneath the picture. This is by Lexi Ryan. This is a spin-off of her These Hollow Vows series, which would have been great to know going in because I haven't finished that series. So now I know who ends up together, which is fine. But I feel like that took away from my reading experience and I gave this 3 stars. It just was all over the place. It was interesting and I had a good time. It was, I don't even want to call it romantasy. This was just straight up fantasy. And that's what I liked about These Hollow Vows was the romantasy element of it. Which I get, like, we're trying to shift. I get it. It's fine. However, I think this would have benefited from a clean slate. Next, I have another arc, and that is The Letters We Keep by Nisha Sharma. I believe this comes out in spring. I loved this. This was so much fun. This was a contemporary romance fiction. I think it was young adult romance. Somewhere in the NAYA, because I think they're college students. This was so amazing. We're following this love story from the 60s and 70s, as well as a love story of 2 kids in present day who are also discovering this story. And it was so cool on how all the mixed media was used. And I really just fell in love with both stories. It was such a good payoff. I honestly wish this book was longer so that the ending was longer. But I gave this 4 stars. That was really my biggest gripe, is it wasn't long enough and everything wrapped up too quickly. But would recommend this one 100%. Really fascinating story. All right. The last book that I read of the month was this beast. I read Flame and Shadow. So I gave this 5 stars. However, I will preface that I did love it. I've read it in the day. Obviously, I still read it in January. It came out the last day of January. Pretty proud of that. I was on an island though, so I had nothing else to do, which was perfect. I loved every second, kinda. I did love every second. However, I do have some issues, which if there is any interest, I will go into, I'll do a spoiler review. I think I did that for another SJM book. I don't remember which. I'll go into my deeper thoughts, but because this is such a highly sought after series, I will not spoil anything. I very much enjoyed it. It took twists and turns that I wasn't expecting, some that I was. A few of my theories were correct, which I was really excited about, and a few of them were way off, which I was also really excited about. There were some technical issues, and technical issues probably isn't the right word. There were just some story issues that I had, but I still love this series and I can't wait to reread it in its like fullness. And I'm really excited to see what Sarah J. Maas does next. So that is going to be the end of this video. I read so much, but I had a really good reading month. The average score for my ratings this month was 4.01, which was really cool. I'm quite happy with that score. That means it was a good reading month. So that's going to be it for today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Leave us any comments down below on what your favorite book was in the month of January and what you're looking forward to for the rest of the year. And I will see you guys in our next video. Bye!